I'm Eric Wright, the education specialist from the
Yeah.
Wisconsin Veterans Museum.
Doesn't look.
And I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight for our virtual movie night discussion. Tonight, we are looking at the movie Jarhead from 2005, directed by Sam Mendes, who we've looked at before when we watched 1917 not long ago. But he's also known for directing American Beauty, if you've seen that one, or one of my favorite James Bond movies, Skyfall. Everybody knows I'm huge on my cinematography. So of course we have Roger Deakins, cinematographer for this film. We saw him as well with 1917 when he worked with Sam Mendes. And he's also worked with Sam Mendes on a few other movies. He did work on Skyfall and as well as Empire of Light. Without Sam Mendes, he's worked quite a bit with the Coen brothers, Fargo and Big Lebowski, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou, many others. I think he's done 8 films with the Coen brothers so far. This movie stars Jake Gyllenhaal. I really like Jake Gyllenhaal. I find him an entertaining and fun actor to watch. Also with Jamie Foxx and Dennis Haysbert. This was filmed entirely in the Imperial Valley, California. And it was shot almost entirely in sequence too, which is not rare, but it's not something that's done quite a bit. This was produced by Red Wagon Entertainment and Neal Street Productions, distributed by Universal Pictures, with the release date of November 4th of 2005. It had an original budget of $72 million, and it took home a box office of $97.1 million. Was not considered a success. I'd like to make 25 million bucks and not be considered a success. I'd be okay with that. Let's just go ahead and since there's just a few of us tonight, we can really get into it. And go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I have a question. You said it was shot entirely in the Imperial Valley. In the credits, they talk about a Mexico unit.
I didn't read anything about a Mexico unit, but usually when I read things like that, if there is like a scene or two that they'll go and do somewhere else, it's usually not included in the credits or the credits that I read online. So I don't doubt that maybe there was a little bit of filming done in Mexico. I didn't catch that in my research on this film. And I will obviously go with what you say. You got the Blu-ray comments and the whole.
That's right.
Well, I was just
the whistle. So
I was just curious because when in watching it, I thought that some of the scenes suggested that when I saw that it said the Mexico unit, thought, oh, that would make sense about that they would have been in Mexico for some of those scenes.
Okay.
But
do you know which scenes in particular they were?
Well, just a lot of the desert scenes, basically. That's what I was thinking about in terms of Mexico. But
well, one of the reasons they went and filmed in the Imperial Valley was because they had sent scouts out to Iraq, and they thought that this was a really good a really good second place instead of going all the way to Iraq to film that. Well, some of the things that I did read was that they they scouted the location in the summer, but when they started filming more toward the end of the fall, a lot of vegetation had grown that they didn't expect. It wasn't there in the summer. So they had to digitally edit a lot of the vegetation out, which is good. At least they didn't just go pull things up and destroy the environment. Filmmakers are getting a little more savvy about that sort of thing. Yeah, I was actually kind of surprised that it was filmed in California. And having been to Iraq, I can definitely see that. It was not the landscape that I expected when I got there. That's true. So I'll just go around real quick, and I'll start on the back end this time since Bonnie was the last one to come in. Bonnie, I'm going to start with you and just get your quick thoughts on the film. How did you like it? Well, you're unmuted, but we can't hear you.
I guess she didn't like it, huh?
I apologize for the puppy noises in the back. Brian, we'll move on to you. How did you like it?
I thought the film was excellent.
Okay.
It's been a while since I've seen it, but I've seen it a couple of times, and I thought it was a very accurate rendering of that experience. What can I say? And I thought the filmmaking Mendes is one of my favorite directors. And I thought that the actors did an excellent job too. I thought it was very gripping. It left me as disturbed as when I was watching Oliver Stone's rendition of my war, Vietnam. And so I had that kind of kinship, disturbing kinship.
I think anybody who's experienced that does have that kinship, that connection. And when you say disturbing, that could be on so many different levels, but I think that's an accurate and fair word to use for sure. John, Karen, how did you guys like the movie?
Yeah. It was okay. I guess for me, it was a rough movie. I mean, it was with the scenes and with the language and
I'm going to interrupt you real quick. I do apologize. I try to pick movies that aren't terribly vulgar anyway. I had never seen this before, so when I did actually watch it, I was kind of like, "Oh my God, what did I do?" So I do have to apologize for choosing a movie that's been a little more vulgar than the ones that we have seen.
Right. Well, and I'm not approved by any means, but it was kind of jarring, I guess. But I understand what people are saying too, that it is a true representation of what these guys go through or went through, and the language and what they do to each other is what happens. So, if that's the way it is, I'm a big girl. I can handle that.
Well, I was on the other side of the room, and I thought it was very representative. I didn't go through a Marine boot camp. I went through an Army boot camp. And the basic guy to guy running around, razzing, wrestling, language, all was so reminiscent of when I was there. And I thought it was really well written in that, because the interaction, the way they interacted with one another, that's maybe half writing and the other half very good acting, that they made it flow that way.
I can see that. I have my own thoughts on the film, which I'll get into after everybody else. But definitely, when you watch movies like this, especially the first half of the movie, this movie kind of reminded me a little bit of Full Metal Jacket. There's like two separate films.
Yes.
And the first half, yeah, it definitely takes you back to your basic training or boot camp experience. And it's not, dissimilar to, like you said, what you went through, Brian, what you went through and what I went through. There is the language, there's the vulgarities, there's, the guy talk that happens when, you're absolutely exhausted and you get about 3 hours sleep. You say things that you wouldn't say anywhere else, probably. Chris, we already spoke. You said you liked it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I liked it a lot. I watched it twice. I watched it straight through first time, and then the second time I watched it with voiceover by Bill Broyles and Swafford, the author of the book, as they commented about the scenes, about how it was written. And both Broyles was a Marine in Vietnam, and Swafford was, of course, the Marine in Desert Storm. And so they were talking about their similar experiences. And the sense that I got from them during that commentary was that this was an accurate portrayal, as accurate a portrayal as you can do it cinematically, of what he had written about in his book. I mean, they talk at one point about one of the scenes, one of the most powerful scenes in the movie, that's actually a combination of two separate scenes in the book. The other thing I liked about it was the actors. I thought the choice of actors in particular. I noticed that Deborah Zane was the casting director on this, and I've seen her name in a lot of other movies, and she always seems to pick the right people for the right roles. And I thought the roles the people that she picked for these roles were just spectacular. I really like Chris Cooper, for instance, as the Colonel. I mean, I've always liked Chris Cooper, and I'd forgotten that Mendes had directed American Beauty, in which Chris Cooper was one of the principal characters. So, and the script writing I thought was terrific. I mean, the vulgarity, yeah, that's if you've been in the service, you know that's what it's all about, pretty much. So I thought it all held together very well. I mean, I don't know about the accuracy of the scenes, the scenery, or anything like that, but I thought the images and the idea that they were trying to get across came across very well. I mean, I thought it was as close to a rock as I would have ever gotten.
And I'm curious, Chris, and I'm going to kind of put you on the spot a little bit. You said that what they were trying to get across, you thought they did very well. What is it you think they were trying to get across?
I thought they were trying to get, a lot of it was the annoyance of the Marines and all the waiting that was going on. As you watch, they tell you the number of troops that are showing up in there, and eventually they get to 575,000, and nothing has happened yet. And in the movie, they show them out patrolling in the desert with nothing happening. In the voiceover, Swafford talked about how, they had the scene where they're going out and they're probing in the desert for these mines. They're doing the practicing. He said that's what they did. He said they went out there and they did that stuff. They just had, it was like make work until the actual combat began. But there was so much time there. And I think they were trying to get across what that boredom was like. And then the frustration with how, in a sense, how quickly it went. I mean, that scene with Peter Sarsgaard where, they bring in the airstrike instead of letting them take the shot. I mean, it was that frustration that I think that scene encapsulated the frustration they were all feeling about being ripped out of their lives, brought to this place, and then, to a certain extent, nothing happening.
And absolutely. I mean, I was hoping you would, go right to that spot, because it's a lot of the reviews I read said this is a war movie without a war. Do you guys think that's accurate, Chris? Obviously, we know your thoughts on that, but what does everybody else think about that comment? War movie without a war.
Well, it seemed like it for them. They spent, I know they put up how many months they were there at one point, and I can't remember what it was, but they were there for a long time before anything. And then there was maybe 4 days of rushed action, where there was supposed to be actually something where it went from Desert Shield to Desert Storm.
Right.
And then it was over. So I just think they were frustrated.
And yeah, and that's, I don't know if that's one, I didn't care for this film very much, to be honest. Maybe I was looking at it too much from a technical standpoint. I really like Roger Deakins as a cinematographer. I don't like what he did with the film in general. And I'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. I also didn't, it's not that I didn't like the acting, I just didn't think it popped. It really just didn't draw me in. And I also don't know if maybe I'm looking at it from my own vantage point because I was in Desert Storm. I can see what they're trying to get across with the waiting and nothing happening and the frustration. We experienced that, except for the frustration. We trained and trained and trained and trained until, those 3 days that we finally got to do something. And we knew what the training was gearing us up for, so we were okay with that. And once we actually went out and, had to fight, we were so confident in ourselves. And we looked back on the training, and it was all because of that. A month and a half that we just sat there in the middle of the desert waiting for our tanks to show up. So we didn't have the frustration. The frustration for us came after the 3 days were over with. And we sat there for another 3.5 months on a border watching a road. That's kind of when the frustration came in. everybody wanted to go home. We even had Dick Cheney come and stand on our tank. He was the Secretary of Defense at the time, and tell us, "Oh, you boys will be home in a week." Yeah, 2 months later, we were still there. So, and I don't understand the. I mean, I do, but personally, I don't understand the fact that they felt cheated because they didn't actually get to shoot anybody or kill anybody. And that point was definitely put across from the middle to the end of the film, but definitely the last quarter of the film. There was some regret, big time regret by the Marines that they didn't get to actually do their job. I don't know, we got to do our job, so maybe I'm not in a place where I can understand that. I don't know. It was a difficult time, but I tell everybody it was the best 6 months of my life. And I am absolutely happy that my war experience was like that. Brian, you said you were in Vietnam. I can't even imagine what that kind of experience is like.
Completely different.
Oh,
Um,
in so many ways.
yeah.
There's no waiting.
No, there's just hiding and killing. If it's okay with you folks, I really don't want to talk about it.
No problem at all. I
don't want to be rude.
No, every veteran that I come across, if they say that they don't want to talk about some of their experiences, I never push them. That's not what you should do to a veteran. You should respect their space, not only physically but mentally. So absolutely, please don't delve in anything that you're not comfortable with. Kind of getting back to the movie a little bit, one of the things that I did mention was I didn't like the way Roger Deakins filmed it. And it wasn't that I don't like the way he filmed it, I don't like what he did in post-production. He used what is called a bleach bypass for the negatives for the film itself. And what that does is obviously you bypass a bleaching process. When you bleach a negative, it takes out some of the graininess, and especially with Roger Deakins in this film, because he shot it all entirely, well, not entirely, mostly on a handheld camera. And as we all know, smaller handheld cameras, the resolution tends to be grainier, the picture isn't quite as clear. And so if you put that through a bleaching process, it takes some of those elements out. And it also neutralizes some of the, I can't remember the exact term, but it's like a silverness that comes into the film as well. So he bypassed the bleaching process and it gave it that sort of, I don't know, ghostly or very, light or white appearance. Does that make sense to everybody when you watched it? Did you kind of pick up on that?
We saw that, but I thought that was done intentionally to make it look desert, sandy, greeny, subliminally, if nothing else.
No, and you're absolutely right. It was done intentionally for that exact reason. I think it detracted from the film, in my opinion.
I thought it helps the film to be like that instead of having very vivid colors, because I imagine a desert being kind of washed out itself, not having a lot of vegetation, just lots and lots of dusty sand. And that was the image that I got out of the film from the way he handled that.
And that's what I expected when I was on my way to Iraq as well. And I was surprised when I got there. There was vegetation, there was grass, there was bushes, not big bushes, but it just was not the topography that I had expected. And I think maybe that's another reason why they chose the Imperial Valley, because they are going to get some of that. You're not, it's not like you would expect, like the deserts of Saudi Arabia or something, or what you see in Lawrence of Arabia or something like that. It wasn't like that at all. So I don't know. Like I said, I like Roger Deakins. I really enjoy his work. I don't know. I didn't like the bleach bypass that he did with this, but that's just my personal opinion. There's another point that I wanted to make about Roger Deakins, and goes kind of along with the empty spaces that you saw in the desert. I mean, if you have a big desert landscape and a platoon of 5 guys, you're obviously going to have some big empty spaces. And do you think he was trying to make a connection between those empty spaces in conjunction with the director, to kind of show the Marines as being stripped of their individuality? It's just blended in with everything else? Sure, go ahead, Brian.
One of the things about this film, and like I say, it's been a while since I've seen it. It's not as fresh as it is for you folks. But one of the things that was effective for me, as it is for every quality movie about the experience of war, that's why Oliver Stone stands in my mind, as well as Stanley Kubrick, as you had mentioned, was the nature of environment. And a lot of people don't understand that you don't just go somewhere and fight. You are in an environment that is always hell. It's always hell. And I think this film for me, although unlike you, I didn't serve in the Gulf. I've never been there. But I got the sense of the environment. I got the sense of an alien, hostile environment where at any moment you could be blown apart by an IED, or you can just douse yourself with water because you're so desiccated. And I don't know, that kind of reached out to me, even though my experience was completely different. So I wonder, you served in that region. Did the environmental aspect, I don't know, grab you?
What do you mean grab you, like take a toll on me, or?
Well, involve you.
Oh, certainly. You're like I said, it's not like you would see in Lawrence of Arabia. It's not that kind of environment, but still, it's the desert. You still have a ton of sand out there, and a little wind kicks up, and it's in everything. I can't tell you how many disposable cameras I lost, and a lot of pictures that I took out there because it was just caked with sand by the time I got back. You go to eat and there's sand in your food. And then of course, yeah, it's hot. It wasn't that bad up until about, maybe mid-April. But after that, it started to get terrible. And by the time June came around, it didn't matter where you put your water at. If you had a huge, 5-gallon thing of water on the back of the tank, or just your water bottle, you put it in the shade, it didn't matter. You're drinking hot water everywhere you went. So it does impact you. It does have an effect. It was a little irritating sometimes, but, and I'm trying to recall, this was 30 years ago, but I don't think it really, like made us to the point where we were angry, or it just didn't really seem to affect us a great deal. We kind of just took it in stride, I guess, is what I'm trying to say altogether here.
I think the scene in the movie that kind of captures the relationship between the soldier and the environment is a scene where Jake Gyllenhaal vomits the desert.
Yes.
He's vomiting the sand. And in the voiceover, when they were talking about that scene, Tony Swafford and Bill Broyles, they came back to, I haven't read the book, so this was something they were saying, is that in the book, Swafford wrote that they thought that they were going into the desert, and it turned out that the desert was going into them. and it was that scene that was trying to capture that image. So I think that goes to the environmental point of what the relationship is between, at least in Swafford and Broyles' point of view, what the relationship was between the Marines and the environment they found themselves in.
And Brian can attest to this. It doesn't matter where you serve at, any sort of combat zone, your environment is one of the things you have to deal with. It's not just the enemy itself.
I agree with Brian that the environment not only impacts you, it stays with you. When I was I started my tour in the southern part of Vietnam and ended in the northern part. And one of the most distinctive things that I remember are smells. The smells of the different areas. And some areas were fresher and cleaner. There were more vegetation, and others were more urban and smelled of cooking all the time. And it's something that you don't see or don't feel, I don't think, in the United States when you go from state to state to state. There are not any big wide swings in just that. The smell sensation, I guess, is a thing that grabbed me the most of different areas. So the environment, yes, sticks with you. It's back there. It's buried in a corner someplace, but it's there.
Yeah, and like I said, that was one thing that struck me, the most, and I still remember it today, was, expecting just desert and coming across grass and small sections of plains. I was like, this doesn't look like Iraq. This looks like, I don't know, maybe Montana in the spring or something. And we never got to the only populated place that we ever went to was a day trip we took to Kuwait City. Other than that, I never saw a town or anything while I was there.
Eric, were the pictures of the looking in the distance and the heat coming off the sand, were those pretty accurate?
Oh, absolutely. Oh, yeah. And in the tanks as well, you have all this metal wrapped around you, and so that just absorbs all the heat. And I remember looking at my vision blocks, and yeah, you just see that, the heat signatures coming up. And as well, since we're on the topic of environment, another thing that I found maybe inaccurate, maybe not, but I am just assuming it is. Maybe I should do a little more research to find out. They were super close to those oil fires, to the point where they were covered in oil. I'd have a hard time believing that anybody was that close to those fires for that long a time. That would be a serious health concern. And certainly when you're in the military, health concerns aren't always at the top of the list. Everybody's talking, well, not now, it was maybe a hot topic 10 years ago, but the Desert Storm Syndrome. And that's, from the depleted uranium from our ammunition. But I don't know, I just found it really hard to believe that they would spend that much time around those oil fires, caked in all that oil, and nobody's doing anything to relieve them or anything. Did anybody find that a little curious? Go ahead, Brian.
I find it believable.
Okay.
I find that the disregard for the soldiers out there fighting by their commanding officers is often negligible. Now, once again, I have no familiarity with the Gulf and that experience, but I'm just speaking in a general fashion. In Vietnam, they didn't give a damn. That was my truth. They just didn't give a goddamn, excuse my language. And so I find that horrible and believable, and not just our services. I think that's true of probably all military. That's
I would agree.
Part of, when we talk about environment, that's part of it. You're caught up, and then all of a sudden you're breathing in uranium or oil or God knows what. And then maybe you survive so-called the war and you go back stateside, and then you have the rest of your life with health problems where you die, all of that. We have a history of that. And for me, those kinds of scenes in the film touched on that, whether intended or not, that you're not just serving when you go overseas. Of course, you're serving when you come back.
Yeah, you do bring something home with you,
which includes the environment. So anyway, sorry about that.
No. These are all good points, and please, this is the reason we have these discussions, is to get everybody's opinion. What I say isn't always right. It's opinion, and we always welcome those at the museum, and particularly when we have discussions like this. So whatever you have to say, right on for you. Good for you. Sure, go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I thought those scenes were probably realistic, at least to a certain extent. What I thought was interesting was we had that again. Peter Sarsgaard as Troy, I think at one point talks about how we're just here to protect the oil, and I thought that the scenes with them being showered in oil kind of captured, at least metaphorically, that we were being bathed, we were being baptized in this war through the oil that we were being sent as mercenaries to protect.
Chris, I love having you on this program. My goodness, that you know, and that never even occurred to me as I was watching the film. But you're absolutely right, and I would not. I can't see Sam Mendes probably not doing that. That is a great metaphor for why we were there. And of course we were there for the oil. There was, you know, oh yeah, let's go and protect, you know, Kuwait because we care so much about Kuwait. Nah, I mean, we do, but let's be realistic and let's be honest here.
You think there was,
go ahead.
do you think there was also a little shot in there with the oily horse? This time it was not a pale horse riding.
It very well could have been.
I know. Why was that horse in there? You know, oily.
I'm surprised it wasn't a camel, quite honestly. I never saw a horse the whole time I was over there.
But as a matter of fact, I looked at Karen, I said, well, it's not a pale horse this time. It's a oily one.
Or
Where did
pale
we see that
iron.
pale horse? Was that
That was in
1917?
that was in the Pit movie with the tankers.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, my memory.
Fury, that's right.
Fury, that's right.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just looking at my notes, that's all.
Oh, okay, yeah, I'm looking at mine as well. Yeah, and this time, you know, I usually start with questions about the movie. This time I started at the back end and looking at some of the film processes, maybe some of the director's motivations or what have you. So I'll kind of move back to the front of my notes here and start with some of the movie questions. It's pretty clear. The first one I asked is, what is the driving force behind Swofford joining the Marine Corps? That's kind of a softball, but he regrets his decision to join, and clearly he gets out at the end. But disregarding the end of the movie, maybe from like halfway through boot camp through, you know, maybe his Desert Storm experience, do you think he regretted his decision to join, or do you think that maybe it wasn't the best decision, but he's good with it?
I think he regretted it at the beginning.
Mhm.
Particularly when he's asked, how did you get here? And he said, at one point he says, I lost my way to college. And another point he says, I signed that stupid contract or something like that. You certainly get that sense that he had certain regrets about it. But I also thought that he was the kind of person who said, okay, I screwed up. I'm going to make the best of it.
Yeah, I think that is one thing that came from this movie. I think that's one of my top 5 lines in movie history. Why are you here? I got lost on my way to college. I rewound that and played that a couple different times because that just had me cracking.
I think he evolved into accepting his role, but I think a lot had to do with the sniper school kind of elevation in his mind and the rest of that group's mind, that they had some special training. They weren't just Marines. They were special. They were sniper, and I forget what the terminology was there. They were recon sniper or something like that.
Sniper scout, I think it was.
Sniper scout, yeah. And that may also have added to the fuel that they were so hyper trained and perfect killing that wanted them to get a kill before they left. You know, we mentioned before that they were so adamant about not getting a kill, and I think that training that they went through as snipers may have elevated that feeling.
Oh, certainly. In the training that we did over there, you know, we were we were revved up. We were ready to go. I mean, they really worked us up. And like I said, maybe I just can't relate with that mentality because we actually got to do our jobs, not very much, but we got to shoot some people. But I don't recall anybody being like that's a goal,
Yeah.
I just don't recall any of my mates having that sort of mentality. I could be. Brian, how about you?
I just wonder whether that aspect that you mentioned of the movie has to deal with another word that looms large with me. We spoke about things like environment before, and the word that comes up for me is memory.
Mm.
Memory. Now, not just like John, you and I going back many years because we're older, but sometimes the immediate memory of what we remember, even something that happened yesterday, a few minutes ago, whether it's traumatic or not. And when you mentioned that, Eric, that word popped out to me because I think we carry memory. I think of the phrase, the things they carried, the things they carried. And memory is something as well that we're constantly carrying, even if we're not aware of it. And I wonder if part of that equation, cinematically or whatever, is what we try to bury. There's memory, and then there's what we try to bury. I want to bury that memory because it's uncomfortable or traumatic, and of course that can lead to PTSD and other stuff. So,
Sure. Or, unless you have a crazy brain like mine, it doesn't let me forget anything, especially some of the worst stuff.
yeah.
The question about whether about the frustration at not killing somebody, I want to advert to a movie we are not going to see, probably will never see, but we might have seen in our own lives, and that's the Jack Reacher movie with Tom Cruise, because the central character in there, the reason that the movie exists is because of this character who was a sniper who Cruise encountered when he was an MP when he was a criminal investigator in the war. He investigated this guy because this sniper had shot some 4 people out of frustration at not having been able to shoot during the war. It turns out that for various reasons, you really ought to see the movie. It's a pretty good movie, actually.
Yeah, it is.
And it turns out that he happened to shoot some bad people. He didn't know it, but that was an example of that was similar to what Peter Sarsgaard was talking about as Troy in that scene where he's so frustrated that they haven't been able to take the shot. This character in the Jack Reacher movie had the same frustration. The Tom Cruise character says he shot 2,500 rounds a week or something like that for how many months and how many years, and never once got to shoot somebody. And finally, the frustration just boiled up, and he shot these 4 people that he was able to see out his window. So I get a sense that the frustration issue is not. It may be a fairly realistic thing. That what Sarsgaard as Troy in this movie expresses is a more common feeling than maybe people want to admit.
And perhaps you're right. I'm starting to think now, if we had gone through those 3 days and never, fired a single round or saw, any of the enemy at all, how would we feel? It's starting to bring up some of, and going back to Brian's point, it's starting to bring up some of my memories. And I know when we were told to stop, after that 100 hours, there was definitely frustration then, because we were still revved up, even though we hadn't slept in 3 days. We're taking caffeine packets or coffee packets, just a taster's choice, and just, hitting that. But we were definitely frustrated when we were told to stop. But, if we hadn't been able to do anything, if we hadn't seen any of the enemy, how would we have felt? That's an interesting question. And I kind of thought of something else as well. Like I said, I was on a tank. All of our targets were, a mile, 2 miles away, maybe even, a half a mile. Snipers, you're right up close and personal with that target.
Yeah.
You might be a ways away, but through the scope, he's right there, standing next to you virtually. So that's a whole different, way to look at it as well. It's much easier to shoot at something that's a couple miles away than something where you can see the color of his eyes or maybe even the gray in his hair or something. That makes it a little more personal, maybe a little more difficult to deal with. Speaking of the sniper aspect, I did have another interesting question that I wanted to bring up. During the sniper school, Jamie Foxx's character, Staff Sergeant Sykes, says, "You've all been taught that thou shalt not kill." And I'm substituting an F word here. He says, "Well, forget that." How do soldiers, how do they square their job with their religion? That's something that I often wonder. And I hope nobody judges me for this. I'm not a religious person at all. So I can't look at it from that perspective. But I always have wondered, how do you take that view of thou shalt not kill and then go into a war zone?
I kind of think it might be analogous to the render under Caesar what is Caesar's, and render under God what is God. If you're a soldier, you're part of Caesar, and so you have an obligation there to Caesar, as opposed to God at that point. And then you hope that there will be forgiveness at the end. I mean, I'm not a religious person myself, so I don't look at it from that perspective either. But I thought it was kind of interesting that Gyllenhaal, at one point, he gets his dog tag. He says, "Can't they just put no preference on there?" Because he doesn't want to be associated with a religion. And then you get the response from I think it was Sarsgaard as Troy says, "What would you rather have, the wrong prayer or the wrong blood type?" I think there's a whole it goes through. I just think. And part of it may be that there is no reconciliation. Maybe you just do what you have to do. You do what you're ordered to do.
Yeah. Anybody else have a thought on that? Sure, go ahead, Brian.
Perhaps in some way that which is, quote, rendered unto Caesar has to do with the dehumanizing, the necessary dehumanization of a soldier. Because if they can't dehumanize you, if they can't strip you of not only the religious part, but we're taught that in elementary school, be kind, don't do bad things. And all of a sudden we get into this environment where all of that is stripped away. They take it away and they replace it with something. And all of a sudden you're sent out there. You're sent out there after being stripped of a lot of these values, Eric, that you mentioned. And then what do you have left? I don't know. What do you have left?
A numb, not completely, but emotionless, trigger puller, basically.
Another point on the religious side is I have this recollection from many, many years ago reading that the original Aramaic of that commandment is not that thou shalt not kill, but thou shalt not murder. And I think there's a difference between, there is a difference between killing and murdering, certainly in a legal sense, and maybe in a moral sense as well. I mean, that it's not wrong to kill if there's a justification for the killing, but it is wrong to murder which implies no justification.
I can see that. That's a very fine line.
Yeah.
And especially when you're dealing with the military, because you have essentially politicians calling the overall shots. So justification can come down to you and it can seem legitimate, but at the same time, especially in this age that we live in, and we've seen it, over and over again, the justification is usually either bogus, made up, weapons of mass destruction, or, just not there. So I don't know. It's a really difficult question, and we could probably, philosophize for the next couple hours on that and still not come up with a good answer. I know we can, as a matter of fact, because it's pretty much been done since war has been created. People are trying to square those two values.
Well, it's the whole just war question.
Well, yeah, and but that's a whole nother slippery too. I mean, every side thinks that their motivation is just. I hesitate to bring this up, but I've often wondered, and I came across this when I was in graduate school. I had a professor bring this up, and it was just a question. He wasn't saying, this is the way it is or what, but how do you take somebody like Hitler, who absolutely believed everything that he was doing was just, and how do you tell him he's wrong? If you believe it in your heart and you think that you're doing the right thing, it may not be the right thing to everybody else, but how are you labeled wrong for that? Karen, did you have a chime in there? I thought I saw your hand.
No, go ahead. No.
Oh, okay. So, that's just a philosophical question that I've always wondered about. I did my military service before college. I was a non-traditional student. So I had that experience when I went into all my history courses. And that one particular question really has always just stuck with me. And I've always wondered what the right answer to that is. How do you tell somebody who really firmly believes that they are in the right, that they're not? There's no answer. I'm not expecting somebody. And this is another question I had too, and we've kind of hit along this, sort of. But I'm wondering if this sniper unit that was depicted in the movie, I wonder if they had I wonder if you think that they had an easier time than maybe if they were in their regular Marine infantry unit, or in maybe some other capacity out there, because they were a small squad. They didn't have a whole lot of oversight. They were kind of given a little, autonomy, so to speak. So I'm curious if they did have, a lot more freedom, a lot more, I don't want to say happiness, but a lot more contentness, I guess, than they would have had if they were in a 100-man unit with people looking down their necks all the time.
Well, I didn't think they had an easy time, when the scenes out there with them, and they weren't just being a sniper at that time. They were digging those foxholes and they were in the oil fields. And I just never felt that was, they had it better than the other rank and file.
Okay.
From a disciplinary standpoint, I think they did have it easier. And I called the photo shoot with the journalists. They were pretty wild and free, and they had one staff sergeant to kind of control them. Whereas in a larger group, they would have had more sergeants in a platoon and a lieutenant, and especially with a camera crew around. So
Certainly.
there was a lot of the discipline was rather loose, I thought.
I thought it was kind of interesting during that media shoot that they didn't have an officer around at all, apparently.
Right.
Yeah, no sort of public affairs officer or anything like that. Just to let a bunch of low-ranking Marines just say what they want. That's kind of a scary thought.
I don't think so.
And they went through and identified them, or when they introduced them in the film crew did, and there were lance corporals and one staff sergeant. So from a corporal to a staff sergeant is a 2-rank jump. So there just wasn't anybody else around. Just seemed loose.
I want to come back to something that Karen said about the foxholes. What struck me about the foxholes was how much they look like graves.
Yes.
Foxholes always do.
Yeah.
I always
But
thought so anyway.
It doesn't, in other movies though, they don't look like that. I mean, these look, to me, these look more like graves than I think than we've seen when they've been dug in other movies.
Chris, they also have a different terminology. They call them sleeping holes.
Hmm.
They didn't, they weren't called foxhole. They call them sleeping holes. And I thought that was, I thought, well, I just gave it up as a Marine term.
Maybe.
I never heard that one in the Army,
No.
sleeping hole. But then again, I wasn't infantry either. My recruiter asked me if I wanted to walk or ride. I said, well, I'd rather ride than walk. So that's what I got. Chris, I'm curious, kind of going back to Swove's motivations to join the Marine Corps. His father and his uncle were Vietnam veterans. And I read about a scene that had been cut from the theatrical production of Sam Rockwell playing Swove's uncle. And he has a short conversation with him. And I was curious if that was included on the version that you have, or if there's any mention of that in the notes or comments.
No, the only extras on the DVD, on the Blu-ray, were one was a running commentary by Sam Mendes, which I had not watched, and the other was the running commentary and conversation between Bill Broyles and Tony Swofford, and no mention. I don't recall any mention of the cut scene. I mean, that cut scene does not show up as one of the extras.
Yeah, I was just curious if it was. It says, from what I read, it's on the DVD version. But I know you have Blu-ray. Maybe there's a difference there.
I'm surprised it's been on the Blu-ray too.
I really would have liked to see that scene.
Didn't see it on
No,
TV.
we had the DVD.
Yeah, we didn't
Not
see
there?
it. No.
No.
Okay, all right. We're starting to get a little low on time. I always go back to my, I do want to ask this question before I get to favorite character. And I've asked this question of other movies before, and I think some do a better job of others. I don't think this film did a particularly good job, though. Do you think the characters in this film, do you think it was the stock war movie, platoon type of characters? You have the religious guy, you have the country guy, you have the city guy, you got the guy who has the high morals, you have the guy who'll do anything. We seem to see this throughout, all of our films where there is a platoon or a group component. And like I said, I think some films do a better job of not being so stereotypical. I don't think this one did, and I'm just curious what everybody else thought.
There was a slight attempt at it with Chris Black was the country boy, and the guy with the glasses was kind of the deep thinker, and his buddy
Swolf was reading. What was he reading in the
blue screen? Yeah.
Oh, I forget.
Oh, it was Camus, I think.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
was, yeah.
So there was a diversity there, but I don't think it was amplified throughout the story.
Okay.
I don't think the stereotypes were as clear cut in this movie as they've been in some other movies, frankly.
All right. Brian, how did you feel about that?
I just sort of accept those kinds of characters, I guess, because I've seen so many good quality war movies, and I can understand how scriptwriters will delineate characters so that they can be accessible to audiences. If you have a character who is so far out there and so strange, they may feel it's difficult for audiences to relate to that character. So I don't know, maybe because I'm an old codger, I kind of was groomed on.
You look like a young man to me.
Thank you so much. And the same to you, sir. Same to you.
Thank you.
We're both boomers. But I think there is that accessibility question not only from the scriptwriter, but from the director and also the actor. I mean, I had a life in theater. That's something I did. So I understand from an acting point of view, you try to find what is it about the character that makes that character accessible and maybe universal. So in a way, I understand that. And when I think of what I think are the better movies about the experience of war and conflict, you know, once again, Oliver Stone, Stanley Kubrick, those are my faves, but they have those qualities. Now, not that they are so stereotypical that they're watered down. I don't mean that, but that you can somehow get into them and understand where they're coming from. Does that make sense, or am I just off in a tangent?
No, that makes absolute sense. I think some films, I mean, and you're always going to have that dynamic. You know, when you take a bunch of people all over the country and you put them together in a small unit or basic training or whatever, you're definitely going to have that dynamic. You're going to see those differences between the people. I just think some films do a better job of bringing that out than others. Other films, it seems more forced. Like, you know, I'm supposed to have this and this and this and this. It's clear that when you watch the film, it just doesn't seem natural. But Brian, you're right. There's other films where that dynamic does seem more natural. It's almost to the point where you don't even notice it. I really noticed it in this film. And once again, I wasn't a big fan of this film. Last question, my favorite question of all, everybody's favorite character and why. Bonnie, were you able to get some audio there, or? I don't think Bonnie was, no. How about you, Brian? Who's your favorite character and why?
Like I say, it's been a while since I've seen the film, so I'm not as fresh as you folks are. And then Gyllenhaal and Fox are two of my favorite actors. I think they're excellent. And they both did, I thought, an excellent job. But when I think back, there's something about Jamie Foxx's character that still resonates to this day. And unlike you folks, it's been a while since I've seen it. And I'm not sure if I can put my finger on it, but I think he's an excellent actor. Well, they were all excellent, I thought. They were all good. But I don't know. There's something about what he has inside and how it comes outside without, like, as you say, or being forced. So I guess Jamie Foxx's performance resonated the most with me.
Sure.
Not that he was better than anybody else. It's just that kind of grabbed me.
And as a stage actor, that means a lot.
To me,
you obviously have that insight, and I think you're right. And I've seen Jamie Foxx in different roles as well, and he just comes across naturally. It doesn't matter if he's, you know, in the movie Ray, or if he's playing a staff sergeant, or a tough guy, you know, on the street, or a caring and concerned father. It comes across as a natural reaction to him. I do like Jamie Foxx a lot. John, Karen, who's your favorite character and why?
Yeah, I think we both agree
Yep.
on this one, and it's the same. It's Jamie Foxx. That I don't know. I thought he was a great actor and just played that part very well. He was the Marine, and he was, you know, and I noticed that, and I was impressed by that. So yeah, he was my favorite.
Right. One of the things that we're watching it, and the scene where he explains to Swofford why he's in the Marines and not a plumber or something with his brother,
Construction, yeah.
that he loves it. And that whole scene, I just kind of looked at her and said, yeah, that's the one. He's got it. Just the way he presented that.
Yeah,
You know?
yeah.
So we didn't have to arm wrestle this
Yeah.
month. We agreed.
We agreed.
I think that's the first time.
I think so.
it is.
Chris?
Well, I like Jamie Foxx, but he wasn't my favorite character. As I watched him in this film, I thought about the other film where I thought that he just did a terrific job, and that was in the movie Collateral, where he plays a taxi driver who winds up chauffeuring Tom Cruise around, and Cruise is a hired killer out on a mission throughout the night to kill a bunch of people. And Jamie Foxx, as the driver, is trying to figure out how to get out of this thing, and also to save one of his earlier passengers, who is Cruise's ultimate target. And I thought Fox did a terrific. I loved the way he played that role, and really like the way he played the role here. But I think the character that I kind of found myself most drawn to was actually Troy, the Peter Sarsgaard character, in part because he was the tragic figure in this movie.
Yeah,
The man who wanted to be a Marine, like Jamie Foxx, or maybe like Chris Cooper's Lieutenant Colonel, but because he had lied on his application, he was not going to be able to reach his goal. And then you get to the closing scenes, and you see him in the coffin, and you're not quite clear whether he died of a broken heart or whether he died of suicide. And so he kind of held together various parts of the movie. He was kind of like a father figure to Gyllenhaal, the Gyllenhaal character, kind of being a stabilizing force in the whole thing. So that he was my choice he's the one I found myself drawn to throughout the movie.
I'll go with Jake Gyllenhaal. He has a unique presence about him when he's acting. And I actually read a review that said that one of the things they liked best about this film was that he didn't try to show off. I think maybe if he tried to show off just a little bit more, it would have enhanced his character. But still, I liked Jake Gyllenhaal as not only an actor, but I liked the role that he had here. I thought it fit him very well. He actually thought that he wasn't going to get the role. He auditioned for it, and weeks had gone by leading up to, I think, a couple months, and he hadn't heard anything, and he was certain that he didn't get it. And he got Sam Mendes's phone number and called him and left him a very impassionate voicemail. And it was that voicemail that actually got him the role. I'd love to hear that voicemail. I know I never will.
I thought I wanted to comment on Gyllenhaal because I thought that the sequence of scenes that really I thought he did so well started out with a scene where he had to stir up the diesel in the shit, and that led to the scene where he puts the rifle in the face of his fellow Marine. And that was the scene that Swafford and Broyles said combined two different scenes out of the book. That in fact, the two scenes that were combined, one scene was that, and then the other part of it was when Swafford has the rifle turned on him, tells him to shoot him, and that was a separate scene in the book where Swafford actually did that, pointed the rifle at himself. I thought Gyllenhaal carried out those two scenes so well. You got that you could see how awful he felt about having to stir up the diesel in the shit, and then realizing, and then taking that to the next step with blaming the other character in the movie for it.
Yeah, and I could tell you, and I'm sure a couple of you guys know as well, stirring those pots is no fun.
Remember what I said about smells.
That is one of the smells you will carry for the rest of your life. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining me tonight. I hope everybody has a great holiday season, wonderful new year, and I look forward to seeing everybody back in January. I cannot recall what our film is for January.
I think it's Female Agents, isn't it?
You might be right. You might be right. And like I said last month, yeah, I try to choose a lot of movies that, maybe aren't at the top 10 of the war movie list. I did take some suggestions from some of our participants here. So next year's slate of films is maybe going to be a little different, but I'm definitely looking forward to them. I will try to watch them in advance as much as I can. Maybe have to change one or two out if they're anything like this one. Like I said, I try not to make them too vulgar. Otherwise, we would have watched Full Metal Jacket a long time ago. But once again, everybody, thanks for joining me tonight. I really appreciate it. I love these conversations. We didn't have quite the attendance tonight that we usually do, but still, it just never ceases to amaze me how well the conversation goes, whether there's 18 of us or just 4 of us. It's always a lot of fun, and always interested in getting everybody's different viewpoints, how everybody looks at the filmmaking processes. Makes me smarter. I think it makes everybody else smarter too, or at least maybe a little more.
Yeah.
So I hope everybody has a great rest of your weekend. And like I said, happy holidays, happy New Year.